things started happening on the property. The first thing that I realized when I started seeing things here was that I was woefully unprepared. We used to find things moved around in the house, furniture and stuff moved around in the house. They're trying to make a statement.
Most people are familiar with Skinwalker Ranch and the strange occurrences there, but close by in the Valley of the Sun in Arizona lies another bizarre ranch. John Edmonds had always wanted a ranch from being a small child. He loved animals and had a dream of owning his own ranch where he could rescue horses and canines and give them a better life. In 1996, psychiatric therapist and former FBI employee John Edmonds and his wife Joyce bought Stardust Ranch. This ranch would soon become a living nightmare for the family. On the first day of moving into the property, John would find out that the previous owners had left all of their belongings inside the house almost as if they had left in a hurry. John called the real estate agent that had sold the house and voiced his complaint. He was advised that the previous owners would come back and everything would be removed within a few hours, and that in the meantime, John should go to the nearby town to kill some time. At this point, Joyce was at work, so John went alone. Later that day, John would return home to a very bizarre sight. All of the belongings that were inside the house, including the appliances, were now trashed and at the bottom of the empty swimming pool outside. John, angry and confused, called the estate agent again and told him that the previous owners had been and trashed his pool with all of their belongings. This baffled the estate agent, and he said that the previous owners did come to pick up their stuff, but they thought that John must have angrily thrown their furniture into the pool, and as a result they refused to retrieve their belongings. John was never able to get in contact with the family again. 3 days later, John finally managed to clean up the pool and move in. He was stood in the kitchen putting some things away when he noticed a man walking towards the gate of the ranch. He described the man as looking like an old veteran of the military. He was wielding a machete and continued making his way to the ranch. John, obviously apprehensive about this, grabbed his gun, concealed it, and went out to confront the man. John asked the man what he was doing there, and the man strangely replied that he lived and worked there. John, now confused, told the man that he'd just bought the property and asked what the man did on the ranch. The man shook his head and said that he kills the monsters. John, thinking the man was talking about birds or some other predator, asked him what he meant, and the man said that he'll find out soon enough. John then asked him to leave. The man turned and said that you'll be sorry for not letting me stay. The man left and John never saw him again. Some time had passed and things had been normal up to this point. John and Joyce had settled into their home and was enjoying the property. John had been able to fulfill his dream to look after some resettled horses. Now, it's important to note that this was in 1996, a time before everyone had mobile phones glued to their hands, and John wanted to get a phone line installed into the house. He rang the local phone company and asked if he could have the line installed. They told him yes, except no one ever came, and this was repeated 2 more times until John got annoyed and spoke with the manager. The manager seemed confused and promised John that someone would come out to the house this time. When the worker arrived, he seemed apprehensive and worried about getting out of his truck. John came over and assured him that his Rottweilers were in the house and wouldn't be a problem. The worker said that it's not the Rottweilers that he was afraid of and that nobody wanted to come out here. John, very confused now, asked what he meant, and the worker said, "Don't you know about your house?" Thinking the man was just being dramatic, John joked and said sure, it's big, beautiful, and in the middle of nowhere. The man, being dead serious, told John that many strange things had happened on the property before his arrival, so John inquired about the history of the house. He learned that the original owner and builder of the house purchased it as a surprise for his wife. She came to look at their new home and she said that she couldn't live there, that she felt a very dark presence on the property and was too afraid to move in. That was the only time she stepped foot on the property and never returned. Eventually, this led the couple to divorcing and the man sold the property. Eventually, later owners would come to turn the land into a ranch, and by all accounts were very successful ranchers. They ended up having children and lived happily at the ranch for a long time. At least, they were happy up until the day before their son graduated from high school. For unknown reasons, their son committed suicide with the use of a shotgun. No one could figure out why this was the case. He had a lot of friends, wasn't bullied, and was doing very well academically. It seemed as though he had a bright future ahead of him. After this incident, the owners could no longer remain at the ranch and they sold it. Now, shortly after having the phone line installed, things started to get strange. On several occasions, the Edmonds would start to see lights in the distance. Thinking that people were on the ranch with flashlights, John would investigate, only to find these lights would rapidly zoom off away from him, sometimes across the land and other times into the sky. These incidents would come to leave John baffled, and he had no idea what was going on. Joyce would later remark that she was scared of whatever was happening as it didn't seem natural. She wanted to sell the property, but John couldn't give up his dream. He was quoted as saying, "This is my ranch and I won't be chased off by lights." They kept silent about these occurrences as they didn't want to deal with the stigma of being associated with UFOs and other bizarre phenomena. However, things were about to get dark. John would start to find dead animals on the ranch, but he had no idea what sort of predator could be causing it. The animals were mutilated and would be drained of all blood. They would be missing their eyes and tongue, which seemed to be removed with surgical-like precision. His horses would seemingly vanish, and some of the family dogs also found themselves victims to this mutilation. He would later find out that he was not the only one affected by this, and other people in the surrounding area also made complaints of their animals being killed and disappearing. John would begin to notice other seemingly impossible events. One morning, while walking to his horses, he noticed that some of the heavy metal fence panels, weighing around 100 pounds, were bent like pretzels. One of them was tied around one of his horses. John said that he had absolutely no idea what could have done this. He called the livestock board and they were baffled too, offering no explanation, except to say that it wasn't a coyote or anything like that, which obviously wasn't helpful to the Edmonds. Some time had gone by now, and John started to get an eerie feeling that someone was watching him and his wife. He couldn't quite explain it, but said that it was really creepy and tried to keep his discomfort a secret from Joyce as he didn't want to scare her. He said that it got so bad that he didn't even want to get in the shower because it just felt as though there was someone there with him. Joyce would later remark that the house just didn't feel right. When John asked what she meant, she said, "I just don't feel alone." She again requested that they sell the property and leave, but John remained adamant that he wasn't going to be scared out of his own home. One night, they went to bed, and on this particular night, Joyce was snoring loudly, which was preventing John from falling asleep. That feeling of not being alone returned and crept back up on him. He said that he began to see 3 shadows slowly moving around the room. This scared John deeply, and he was frozen in place. Remembering that he kept a baseball bat beside his bed, John regained his composure and reached for his weapon. What happened next made him go cold. He felt something lightly tapping against his outstretched arm. He grabbed his bat with one hand and grabbed whatever was touching him with the other. John jumped out of bed and hit what he described as a grey-coloured entity with his bat multiple times, but said after the 3rd strike it just vanished along with the other 2. John quickly dropped the bat, woke Joyce up and exclaimed that he knows what killed the horses. Now, after this incident, these entities began to make themselves known to the Edmonds. Late at night, both John and Joyce would begin to describe seeing entities that they thought were extraterrestrials. They were normally small in size, around 3 feet, with large heads, skinny limbs and black, bulging eyes. John went on to note that they were aggressive. He believed that these beings were the ones responsible for torturing his animals. During one such incident where these entities made themselves known, he asked, "What are you doing on my ranch? Why are you violating my house? Why are you trying to kill my family? And why are you killing my animals?" He never received an answer to any of his questions, but they did continue to be aggressive and harmful to the Edmonds and their animals moving forwards. The Edmonds would be visited by these entities up to 3 times a week. They were always in groups of 3. John, now thinking the bat to be ineffective, wanted to kill one of these beings as evidence of these strange visitations and replace the bat with a sword. It was 6 o'clock and getting dark. John was heading towards his kitchen when he noticed 3 of these entities inside his home. His Rottweilers began barking aggressively and charged at the entities. They began biting at them, while John struck one of them with his sword, impaling it and retrieving a chunk of flesh as he brought the sword back. The entities then vanished into thin air. John, not knowing what to do, placed the flesh inside a glass jar and stored it in the freezer. He noted that the flesh was emanating what he described as a liquid that resembled brake fluid and seemed to be very acidic. At the time, John was a producer for a radio station and worked alongside the host, Kevin Smith, who put John in contact with a captain of the US Air Force named Robert Collins. John got in touch with Robert and asked him, if you had found a dead alien, what would you do with it? Robert asked if he had one, and John said that he had part of one. Robert then put John in touch with biophysicist Dr. Levengood, who showed skepticism but great interest in John's situation. John sent the flesh to Dr. Levengood, who performed a number of procedures and tests. He kept some of the flesh for himself and sent some of the flesh to a number of major universities for testing without telling them what it was claimed to be. The flesh then underwent DNA testing at these facilities. Dr. Levengood got back in touch with John 3 months later. He seemed excited and told him, "You have the smoking gun, you have absolute proof of alien visitation here on Earth." He goes on to tell John that they need to call Big TV and stage a news conference about the findings, but John wanted to do it in a less dramatic way and suggested that they go to a scientific conference instead and show the findings. Now, this is where things get really bizarre. John and Dr. Levengood had this whole thing set up. They had dates for the conference, people had signed up to attend, and everything was ready to go. However, suddenly, Dr. Levengood cut all contact with the Edmonds. John would later find out that Dr. Levengood had died. He had reportedly tripped and fell in his lab, causing head injuries. John would also find out that the samples had gone missing, and to make matters even more mysterious, Dr. Levengood's wife died a couple of weeks afterwards. Sometime after this, John and a friend of his were outside cleaning his gun collection when all of a sudden a black SUV pulled up to the ranch and 2 men dressed entirely in black got out of the car and proceeded towards the gate. The gate was 7 feet tall and it was locked. John was about to go over to the gate to let them in, however they just walked right through it. John and his friend, scared now, jumped and backed away. John had said that he thought they were with the government and wanted to scare him and must have had some sort of advanced technology that the general public wasn't aware of. These men proceeded up the path towards John and at 10 feet away they stopped. John said, "Who are you guys? Can I see some ID? You're trespassing here." They looked John straight in the eye and said, "Stop posting the pictures and information about the alien craft." John, trying to show that he wasn't scared, again requested for the ID and they ignored him. They turned around and walked back to their SUV, again right through the gates and left. John went on to note that the men looked really strange and didn't seem right. They wore black glasses, were extremely pale and had no facial expressions. John, now fearing for his safety, decided to go public and appeared on radio stations such as Coast to Coast to share his story. Thinking that if his story was out there, it would be very suspicious if he were to suffer the same fate as Dr. Levengood. Joyce, on the other hand, wished to remain silent and has indicated that she wishes to have no publicity and refuses to take part in interviews. Throughout their time spent at the ranch, the Edmonds reported being harassed on numerous occasions, during which they were unable to move or scream, and this seemed to happen to Joyce more than John. However, John has said that he believes that these beings have branded him. Without warning, he felt an excruciating pain and a sense of crushing pressure followed by an indentation in his left leg. They have both woken up with puncture wounds on their skin, and many times they would find bruises on their inner thighs, abdomen and chest. They have both been left with triangular depressions in the skin, have experienced skin disfigurement similar to what one would experience if exposed to radiation. The Edmonds have also reported many accounts of missing time and fear that they may have been abducted. Joyce reportedly has levitated on several occasions, and John, in an attempt to prevent her from being abducted, handcuffed her to the bed overnight. On a previous occasion, John noted that she was being levitated into a beam of light, but John opened fire with an AK-47 in the direction of the craft and she was released. These encounters are incredible and unbelievable, but the Edmonds maintain that everything they have reported is true. Incidents would continue to occur on the ranch, and the Edmonds would be visited by these men in black numerous times, almost as if the men were observing them. In 2016, John and Joyce agreed that they needed to sell the ranch and leave for their own safety. To this day, I do not believe that they have sold the ranch yet, but Robert Bigelow, the owner of Bigelow Aerospace, did at one point show interest in the property. Now, I have come across a theory that made the case that perhaps John's story is true but exaggerated. It was noted that these men in black may have threatened John and Joyce with the same fate as Dr. Levengood and told him to spread the story but to exaggerate it to make it look like the ravings of a madman. Obviously, that is total speculation and there is no evidence of any kind for this, but nevertheless it remains an interesting theory. I'd just like to thank everyone for supporting the channel. I really appreciate all the nice comments. I do read them all and reply when I can, so feel free to keep leaving them. And sorry if this video sounded a little different to normal. I've got a new microphone and I've got a bit of a cold as well, so yeah, hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'd just like to say a special thank you to my patrons for supporting me over at Patreon, which is linked in the description if you'd like to take a look. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, it helps me a lot. I hope you have a great day, or evening depending on where you are. Be safe guys, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.